The year I entered the palace, I accidentally got in the way of the noble consort's procession. To appease her, the emperor made a vow. For the rest of his life, he would never show favor to any woman from the Shun family. A ruler's word is law. Not long after, I was sent to the most remote part of the palace, Luoxia Pavilion. I didn't see the emperor for 3 whole years. Just when I thought living like this for the rest of my life wouldn't be so bad, the emperor stepped into my palace, seeking shelter from the rain. It was the 4th day of the 3rd lunar month, the noble consort's birthday. Every palace was bustling. Those of lower rank were racking their brains trying to come up with unique gifts to please her. Those just below her in status watched with wide eyes, secretly hoping someone would make a mistake. None of this had anything to do with me. Though I was technically one of the emperor's women, I held no official title, and I had never once seen him. 3 years after entering the palace, I was still Justin Zayunu, an unranked palace woman selected for beauty. Honestly, that saved me a lot of trouble. But I had other things to worry about. I had to deliver the embroidery I'd been working on for half a month to Imperial Physician Sun from the Imperial Medical Bureau before the palace gates locked for the day. He made his rounds to Consort Row at this time every month and would pass through the Imperial Garden. All I had to do was wait there and hand it to him discreetly. He would smuggle it out of the palace and help me exchange it for some silver. In a place like the Inner Palace, someone like me, unfavored and forgotten, couldn't survive without money. But that day, just after I handed him the embroidery and was heading back to Luoxia Pavilion, it started pouring. I ran back through the rain. I hadn't even had time to change out of my palace maid's clothes when I heard a sharp, angry voice behind me. "Why are you running? I've called you several times. Go tidy up the courtyard. His Majesty's taking shelter from the rain." It was Lu Gonggong, the chief eunuch who served the emperor. I was so startled I immediately bowed my head. Then, kneeling in the rain, I greeted him. Yes, understood. I didn't dare linger a second longer and rushed inside to tidy up. But no matter how much I cleaned, the place still looked pitifully bare. The household department had never cared about me. There wasn't even hot water, let alone tea. This rain truly couldn't have come at a worse time. And to think it brought this living Buddha to my doorstep. Sure enough, when that figure in bright yellow robes stepped inside, he didn't sit down or even glance my way. He just stood under the eaves. I stood behind him, my clothes soaked through. I couldn't help but cough softly. And at that moment, I felt his gaze fall on me, long and lingering. After a while, he finally spoke. His voice was clear and pleasant, but carried an undeniable authority. "You're the maid here?" I was still wearing a palace maid's uniform. There was no other answer I could give. If I said no, people would start wondering, why would a Zayunu be dressed like a maid? Why had she gone out alone? Where had she been? Who had she seen? I figured it didn't matter. I'd never see the emperor again, anyway, so I quietly replied, yes. He seemed unaware of who lived here. With a trace of displeasure in his voice, he asked, "Who is your mistress?" I understood what he meant. He was the emperor. Wherever he went, everyone should come out to greet him. Yet here at Luoxia Pavilion, no one showed their face, only a timid little maid serving him. I exhaled quietly, realizing trouble was surely coming. I was just about to kneel and come up with some excuse when Lu Gonggong spoke up first. "Your Majesty, only a Zayuna lives here. Her surname is Shun." The emperor frowned. His last palace election had been 3 years ago, right after his coronation. Only a dozen or so women were chosen. They had all long since been assigned ranks. Why was there still an unranked Zayunu in this forgotten corner of the palace? "Your Majesty," Lu Gonggong added. 3 years ago, a Zayunu offended the noble consort. The emperor's expression froze slightly. A hint of realization crossed his handsome face, and he said calmly, "Oh, her surname is Shun, is it? She only has one maid serving her?" he asked. I quickly answered, "Yes." He immediately lost interest in further questioning. He seemed to understand now why this place was so cold and desolate. Because 3 years ago, he had personally vowed to the noble consort that he would never show favor to a Shin woman again. And an emperor's word is as good as stone. Even if I lived to old age in this palace, I would never see him again. No matter how beautiful I was, no matter how hard I tried to entice him, the emperor would never spare me a second glance. Because he had sworn it himself. What reason would he have to break that vow for someone like me? The rain just kept falling and falling. I stood off to the side, my legs going numb, my head growing dizzier by the second. The emperor never once told me to go change into dry clothes. And then I fainted. Just before I lost consciousness, I instinctively reached out to steady myself against him. But this man was far from tender-hearted. He froze for a moment, then quickly pushed me away. I collapsed to the ground. When I woke up, the rain had stopped. I was still lying there, sprawled in a most undignified position. The maid who served me was called Yunwoo. She was brought with me from the Shun household and had been by my side for over 10 years. She had gone to the imperial kitchens earlier, and the rain had delayed her return. When she saw me lying there, she rushed to help me up and sighed as she pointed to the table. "I brought you some porridge. Good thing we can still sell your embroidery for some silver. The kitchens usually don't give us too much trouble." I changed out of my wet clothes, drank the porridge, and finally got some sleep. When I woke, Yunwoo told me that shortly after the rain stopped, the emperor had run into Lady Su in the imperial garden. And just like that, after one meeting, Lady Su had become concubine Su. Yunwoo sighed and said to me, "Every woman in this palace has her own fate, like 100 flowers blooming. Except you. Except me. I would never have my moment in the sun." I didn't think much of it at the time. I gave her a few casual words of comfort and was about to get up. Lying down for too long had made my back ache terribly. But then, out of nowhere, Yunwoo suddenly held out a handkerchief in front of me and said, "Oh, right, is this yours?" I don't remember seeing it before. I looked at her palm. It was a pale lilac handkerchief embroidered with bamboo. The craftsmanship was exquisite, and the fabric was shoe brocade, a new tribute offering just introduced this year. Clearly, it wasn't mine. A possibility struck me, and my face turned pale. I looked at Yunwoo and said, "This might belong to His Majesty." Yunwoo was startled, her hand trembling. I pressed my lips together and told her everything that had happened earlier. She asked nervously, "What should we do? What if His Majesty sends someone back to look for it?" I clutched the handkerchief tightly, staring out into the night. After a pause, I said slowly, "We'll just have to take it one step at a time." For days after that, I was on edge, constantly worried. But no one from the palace ever came looking for the handkerchief. Only then did I finally relax. But one night, just as I was about to go to bed, I heard loud knocking at the palace gates. The sound was sharp and urgent. Then came a familiar, high-pitched voice. "Open the door. His Majesty is here." Yunwoo's hand froze in midair just as she was about to open the door. I clenched my fists and told her, "Go lie back down. Give me your outer robe." That night, when I fell, the emperor and his attendants probably saw what I looked like. Now, the only option was to keep playing along. I opened the door. Before I could say a word, I heard a voice laced with suppressed anger. "I lost a handkerchief when I came here the other day. Did you see it?" I kept my head down, pretending to think. After a long moment, I replied, "Was it a pale lilac one? I thought it belonged to consort Shen, so I kept it." The emperor let out a cold laugh. "It was mine. Go get it." I moved quickly and returned not long after, holding the handkerchief with both hands. Eunuch Lu quickly said, "Your Majesty, look, it's still in perfect condition. Her ladyship the noble consort will be pleased to know that." Only then did I understand why the emperor was in such a foul mood tonight. It turned out that this handkerchief had been a gift from the noble consort. Earlier, when she asked about it and he couldn't produce it, she threw a fit. She even brought up Lady Su, who had recently gained favor. Crying and sulking, she accused the emperor of no longer caring about her. They ended up arguing, and after leaving her palace, the emperor came straight here. I stood silently in place, bowing a little lower. But unexpectedly, the emperor didn't take the handkerchief right away. Instead, he stared at me. After a long pause, he spoke in a low voice. "I remember you. Last time, you almost fainted into my arms. Look up." Now I understood. Last time, after I fell, he hadn't turned back to look at me. That night had no wind, no rain. Only the moon hung high in the sky. Its light happened to fall on a woman's pale wrist, so slender it looked like it could be snapped with just a gentle squeeze. Her waist was slim, and her head was bowed. Even without seeing her face, one could tell she must be beautiful. And for someone as highborn as the Son of Heaven to say something like that, it wasn't hard to guess what he was thinking. If this had happened 3 years ago, when I was first sent here, I probably would have been overjoyed. But the woman standing here now had already endured 3 years of cold neglect. Her heart had long grown calm, no longer hoping or begging for the Emperor's love. Besides, if he ever found out that I was actually the Shun family girl he once cast aside, he would surely be furious. That would be a crime, deceiving the Emperor. What now? Was I supposed to faint again? Just as that absurd thought crossed my mind, a voice called from outside. "Your Majesty, the noble consort has sent someone to look for you." At those words, the Emperor gave a soft snort. He didn't bother with me anymore. Let's go. At least she still has some conscience left. With that, he casually took the handkerchief from my hands, tucked it into his robe, and turned to leave. After that scene, the Emperor stayed in the noble consort's palace for another 2 weeks. Poor Lady Sue had only just begun to rise in favor, only to be pushed aside. As for me, I had seen so much of this kind of thing that I didn't feel a single ripple in my heart. For a brief moment, I even thought, maybe this quiet life of mine wasn't so bad after all. My family had no power or influence. I was never destined to win the Emperor's affection, which meant no one would remember me or bother keeping an eye on me. It was then that the second rain of spring arrived. Yunwoo came down with a high fever that lasted the entire day. I spent silver on several doses of medicine, but nothing helped. So I thought I might try my luck at the Imperial Garden to see if I could run into Imperial Physician Sun. I remembered he had a certain pill that worked well for colds. And as luck would have it, I really did run into him. After giving me the pill he carried with him, Physician Sun looked at me for a moment and then added quietly, "He returned yesterday." I looked up. His voice was low in the rain, tinged with helplessness. "He asked me to tell you, he'll find a way to get you out of the palace." Because I was worried about Yunwoo, I walked back quickly. Not paying close enough attention, I nearly tripped. Just as I straightened up, I heard a soft laugh nearby. The person stood in the pavilion, tall and upright, with a cold, jade-like presence. Through the rain curtain, his voice was somewhat indistinct. "It's you. Why can't you ever stand steadily? Come to me." My heart tightened, and clutching my umbrella, I walked over. I could feel his mood was bad. Worse than the night he came looking for the handkerchief. Back then, his anger was on the surface, as if deliberately showing it. But this time was different. I bowed deeply. "Your Majesty." Unlike before, when he was surrounded by attendants, this time he wore ordinary clothes and had no one by his side, more like a nobleman out enjoying the rain. He looked at me, seemingly intrigued, and said, "The rain is heavy today. Everyone else is shut inside, yet you came out and are walking so fast. What are you up to?" After speaking, he didn't wait for my answer, but chuckled softly. "Forget it, I won't ask." I breathed out slightly, about to take my leave, but he spoke again. "I am the Son of Heaven, wealthy over the 4 seas, yet you don't want to be my woman." Why? He had seen through it. That day when he told me to raise my head, my hesitation. Now, when he beckoned me forward, my unwillingness. I should have denied it, told him there was no such thing, that I was willing to be his woman. But I pressed my dry lips together. "Precisely because of that, your servant dares not offend your Majesty." Because he was too noble, too far out of reach. The Emperor paused, seemingly pleased, and smiled. "I'll believe you this once. Go. Tomorrow night, I'll be here waiting for you." My steps froze. Yes. This time, he still didn't see my face, but he recognized me at a glance and told me to come again tomorrow. Maybe it was just a casual remark, perhaps I wouldn't see him at all then. But he was the Son of Heaven. When he spoke, I had to obey. Only much later did I learn this day was his mother's death anniversary. The emperor's birth mother was the renowned consort Rome, said to have had a beloved before being forced by the late emperor to stay in the palace, eventually bearing the current emperor. While he was still young, consort Rome died in sorrow. The next day when I arrived, the emperor was already there. He still had no one beside him. I saw no palace maids or eunuchs on the way. Clearly, the emperor had already ordered it. Today it would be just him and me here. He stood with hands behind his back, not turning to look at me, instead gazing at the moon. After a long while, he said, "Come here. Stand before me." At first, I thought about altering my face somehow. But the moment I stepped out of Luasia Pavilion, I changed my mind and washed off the red spots on my face. Playing tricks in front of him was too risky. The more I tried, the more it would look like I had some secret to hide. He reached out, touched my chin, and gently but firmly tilted my face to fully reveal it before his eyes. Seeing me clearly, his brows furrowed slightly, his expression darkened. But his hand stayed on my chin, not loosening its hold. After a while, I heard a soft laugh. His expression gradually softened. Not ugly at all. Why be afraid to let me see? I didn't understand why someone so exalted as the emperor would be interested in teasing a palace maid. But that was the truth. When he was about to leave, he lowered his lashes to look at me, a faint smile on his lips, asking, "What's your name?" "I promise you a future, a place to serve before the throne. How about that?" I was stunned and looked up to see his deep eyes. For a palace maid, that was truly a great future. But my true identity was a fourth-rank official's illegitimate daughter. He had once said he would never favor me again in this life. When the emperor's disdain for me became known outside the palace, the Shin family got scared and sent a message overnight. Forget I existed, behave myself in the palace, and avoid attracting unwanted attention. My family name is Shen, my given name is Yang. 1,000 lamps light the night. The pavilion is stirred by wind. The emperor that night was patient. Seeing me silent, he softly asked, "Not willing?" I took a deep breath and suddenly knelt down. "It's not that I'm unwilling, Your Majesty. It's just that I've followed Shinzayunu for so long. The bond between master and servant is deep. I truly can't leave her." The emperor seemed not to expect that answer. He frowned, then reached out to help me up. His hand was cold, like the man himself. At this point, the exalted emperor finally softened his mood and said slowly, "She is pitiful." His expression was stern, but somehow moved. Maybe he recalled that ruined palace and all the unfair hardships the neglected Zayunu might endure in the palace. He smiled warmly. "Then you shall stay with her for now." The moment his hand lightly gripped mine, it stiffened. His words were ambiguous, and I began to feel uneasy. When I returned, my legs were weak. Who would have thought that someone I hadn't seen for 3 years would be seen 3 times in just a few days? And today, he even said those kinds of words to me. It was truly nerve-wracking. Fortunately, I didn't see the emperor again for quite a long time afterward, because noble consort Ning was pregnant. This was the emperor's first child, so naturally, everything had to be handled with care. Everyone said that if she gave birth safely, noble consort Ning would probably be promoted to consort. At the time of the selection, among the many palace maids, only she and I came from poor backgrounds and were placed in the same courtyard. She was gentle by nature, and I often stood up for her. Gradually, we developed some affection. Later, she was summoned to favor, and I was moved to another palace. I never saw her again. After Yunwu finished speaking, she sighed emotionally. Who would have thought that such an unremarkable person back then could come this far? Indeed, the noble consort had been favored for many years and ruled arrogantly. Who could have gotten pregnant right under her nose? Yet noble consort Ning managed it. Not only that, but the emperor personally issued an edict, asking the other consorts to bless noble consort Ning and send her things they had made themselves. In past years, I had nothing to do with such matters. But this time, the emperor suddenly asked, "Is there still a palace made in the palace? This matter should be informed over there." After thinking it over for a long time, I embroidered a talisman for safety that was least likely to go wrong. When I delivered it to noble consort Ning's palace, the noble consort was just coming out. She was exactly the same as 3 years ago, still surrounded by attendants, proud, beautiful, and graceful. Only her complexion was not good. When she saw me, she gave me a cold glance and quickly looked away, as if she didn't know me at all. Or maybe, at this moment, I no longer posed any threat to her. Not like 3 years ago, when she saw me as a major enemy, determined to make a scene that forced the emperor to make that promise. I waited outside for a full hour before someone came out to tell me that noble consort Ning was dining with his majesty inside and probably had no time to see me. No wonder the noble consort had been so angry earlier. "Palace, Mädchen should come another day," they said. I knew it wouldn't be so easy and didn't argue. I agreed and was about to leave, but after just a few steps, someone ran up behind me. It was one of the emperor's eunuchs. He looked quite young, probably new to serving at court. He called after me, "His Majesty just learned you came and specially sent me to catch up with you and say something. His Majesty said that the palace maid who serves you is clever and you should treat her well. It will benefit you in the future." I smiled and nodded. Then I saw the emperor's carriage not far away. He stood with his back to me, distant and cold. The eunuch who came to find me now stood before him and whispered something in his ear. The emperor actually laughed, then lightly raised his hand. "Don't let her come over. Let's go." After watching him leave, I went back and asked to see noble consort Ning again. The harem was full of beauties, many skilled in embroidery. But this time, only my talisman received the emperor's praise. The same eunuch came to give me the reward. After handing over the gift, he didn't leave immediately, but glanced at Yunwu behind me. He looked puzzled for a moment, then after a long pause said, "His Majesty rewarded you with so many things. If palace maid has time these days, she could make some pastries or something and send them to the emperor to show gratitude." I nodded, of course. As soon as he left, the news spread throughout the palace. Unavoidably, people mentioned the events from 3 years ago. But by nightfall, those talks were all suppressed. Everyone smiled and said the emperor's favor was really a slap followed by a date, meaning it was more of a warning than a blessing. Because there was news that a general had returned victorious, and the emperor was in high spirits, planning to pardon the whole country. At the end of the month, the palace would release a batch of palace maids and consorts who hadn't been favored. In hundreds of years since the dynasty was founded, this was the first time consorts who had never been favored were sent out of the palace. My name was on the list, but Yunwu's was not, though she was actually older than me and long overdue to leave the palace. The next day, I went to the imperial kitchen. This time, I didn't spend any money. I simply mentioned that I had come to express thanks, and they cleared the kitchen for me and even arranged 2 helpers to assist. By the time the pastries were finished, it was already afternoon. I wasn't dressed in palace maid's clothes, but wore my own palace attire. Outside the imperial study, a palace maid standing guard told me the emperor was still inside discussing state affairs and told me to wait in a nearby room. As soon as I entered, I heard a very hearty laugh beyond the screen. They didn't try to keep their voices low. The emperor's voice was calm and steady, with a hint of amusement. "I always wondered why you refused to marry all these years. Turns out you fancied her. In that case, my promise back then could be seen as fulfilling your wish. Coincidentally, I've been thinking of sending her out of the palace for some time now. This works out perfectly. We've been ruler and subject for many years, and you're a cold and solitary person. It's rare for you to have someone you like. I will grant your wish." The incense curled in the hall. Suddenly, I heard another voice, cold and sharp like jade striking stone. 3 years without seeing her. I want to know, how is she now? The emperor said, "By chance, her personal maid is right on the other side of the screen." I called her over. Ask whatever you want. Before I could react, footsteps approached. Then I saw two people enter one after the other. The emperor glanced at my clothes and frowned, then beckoned. Come here and talk to him about your mistress. I walked up to them, but hesitated to speak. Feng Yu also looked at me, his eyes narrowing slightly. In that moment, silence spoke louder than words. The emperor suddenly sneered, eyes dark and sharp, asking each word clearly. I told you to speak. Why don't you say anything? I gritted my teeth and knelt down. Your Majesty, actually? The emperor cut me off abruptly. Get out. I could only stand up. Just as I was about to leave, Feng Yu suddenly called after me. Yang Yang. I stopped. He said in a low voice, It's nothing. I waited outside for a long time. Finally, Feng Yu came out. In front of everyone, he didn't say a word to me and left. I knelt outside, head bowed low. After a long while, I noticed a robe embroidered with a sea dragon appearing in my line of sight. He had been in power for many years and was extremely calculating, but now, as if amused by anger, he asked softly, Shenyang? I kowtowed. Yes. He clicked his tongue. Come in. I followed him inside. As soon as I stepped into the hall, someone lifted my chin. The emperor's voice carried anger beneath the surface. Do you know you have committed the crime of deceiving the sovereign? I met his gaze and was about to speak, but he sneered and spoke like a blade. Let me explain for you. That day, you were wearing palace maid's clothes and accidentally met me. You thought you'd have no further contact with me and feared my asking about why you went out on that rainy night, so you let the misunderstanding continue. Is that right or not? I nodded and replied, Yes. Good. Now I ask you, who did you visit that day? Was it Feng Yu's people? He stared at me, not missing a single expression on my face. I whispered, It was noble consort Ning. I have a history with her. That day, I went to her privately, hoping for her help. If your Majesty doesn't believe me, you can ask her. Whether the emperor believed me or not, his grip suddenly loosened, and his expression was less severe than before. What help? I said quietly. Your Majesty must know how I have lived these years. He raised an eyebrow. Oh. I wanted to borrow some silver from her. This time, the emperor really laughed, a deep, faint sound. To want money, even power. Isn't it easier to come to me directly? I was startled and fell to my knees. He looked down at me and after a long moment, swallowed and sneered. Too bad you won't have that chance. Before you came, I had already agreed to give you to Feng Yu. He exchanged his military achievements. No silver, no land, just asked me to pardon your crime of deceiving the sovereign. By that reckoning, I got a great bargain. 2 months from now is your day to leave the palace. You may go. A ruler does not joke. It was so 3 years ago.
And it is so now.
Before this, Feng Yu and I had only met twice. The first time, he was young and destitute, nearly dying on the street, and I had him a doctor. Later, on the eve of my entering the palace, he had already made a name for himself on the frontier. He traveled a long way back just to say one parting word to me, to take care of myself and to rise above others, and left me with imperial physician's son. I never expected that when we met again now, I would be trapped inside the palace, fallen and broken, while he would be a powerful minister relying on his military achievements to get my charges pardoned. I never imagined he would go this far for me. Nor did I think that the way imperial physician's son mentioned to get me out of the palace would be like this. Kneeling before the emperor, I brought up the matter of Yunwu, saying, She has already reached the age to leave the palace, but her name is not on the exit roster. The emperor helped me up and looked at me sharply, his eyes deep and piercing as if trying to peer into my heart. Why do you think her name isn't on the list? It was because of me, because of our 3 previous encounters. Meeting on a rainy night, knocking on the door late at night, chatting quietly under the moon. He had selfish intentions, wanting to keep me close. He was only willing to let Shenyang leave the palace to fulfill the master-servant bond one once mentioned. In the silent, deep palace, he sighed. Fine. She's only a palace maid. Tomorrow I'll have her name added. That night, the Imperial Household Department sent many things to Luoxia Pavilion. Fortunately, everyone already knew I would soon leave the palace, so no one paid much attention. Only noble consort Ning took the chance to send some jewelry and had someone tell me, "The Empress says, from now on, you two are even." If it weren't for her pushing me in the palace corridor back then, I wouldn't have collided with the noble consort in front of everyone. People's hearts are dangerous, and the world is unpredictable. Years later, I used that incident to threaten her, making her help me cover up a lie in front of the emperor. I nodded. All right. Privately, I found Imperial Physician Sun and asked him to pass a message to Feng Yu. Marrying me is a loss for you. If you regret it now, perhaps there's still room to change things. 2 days later, Imperial Physician Sun brought back Feng Yu's reply.
He said,
No loss. No regrets. Red walls, yellow tiles, the moon setting over the quiet steps. As the day of the ritual approached, the palace became busy again. This time, I couldn't slack off. Because of the safety talisman I had embroidered earlier for noble consort Ning, the emperor rewarded me. The noble consort issued an order, asking me to embroider one for the emperor and the other consorts as well. For this, she specially summoned me. When I entered, someone tripped me. My palm hit the ground, cutting a small wound. The noble consort was lounging on her beauty couch, casually telling me to get up as if she hadn't seen anything, sighing. I consider myself beautiful, but even I must admit, you are very pretty. Such a pity, like a pearl covered in dust. When you leave the palace, you probably won't marry well. Cherish these last 2 months while you can. I didn't argue or get angry, swallowing the pain, and said, yes. It made sense. Rumors had spread in the palace these days about my close friendship with noble consort Ning, borrowing money from her. Noble consort Ning was pregnant, and the noble consort was unhappy, having hit a wall with her, naturally venting her anger. When I left the noble consort's palace, I happened to run into the emperor. His attendant carried treasures meant for the noble consort, and as they passed by me, the emperor didn't glance my way. Only after I walked a few steps did I hear a voice behind me. Wait outside. Those few words left no room for argument. I thought I would wait a long time. Just like 3 years ago, kneeling outside the noble consort's palace, my face swollen from being slapped, the emperor passed by me, busy comforting the noble consort. He coaxed her for 3 hours before finally speaking lightly. He ordered me sent somewhere he couldn't see. But this time, I waited only briefly before the emperor came out. He stood before me and said, "Follow me." Following him, I noticed that at some point, everyone else had disappeared. It was just the two of us. I couldn't help but ask, "Does your majesty have something to tell me?" He stopped, his gaze lingering on my face, then glanced at the hand I was hiding in my sleeve, saying, "Take it out." I hesitated and looked at him. The emperor suddenly took out a jar of ointment from somewhere and mockingly asked awkwardly, "Does it hurt?" "Take it out, I'll apply the medicine." I hurriedly refused. No need. But he firmly grabbed my hand and began applying the ointment. His touch wasn't gentle, but was light. After applying it, he calmly asked, "All the women in the palace are spoiled. They'd come to me complaining even if they lost a strand of hair, begging for mercy.
But you?
You avoid me." I looked at him and pulled my hand away, saying, "So, your majesty only found me interesting for a while. After I leave, you won't think of me again." He was silent for a long moment. "How do you know I don't truly fancy you, that I don't have you in my heart?" I took a step back and said, "Your servant is fearful. Not Chenchi, Chenchia, humble self, but Chenu, Chenneard, servant woman. Soon, I would become his wife." The emperor stood silently, lips curling slightly, his gaze sharp. "Are you so sure now that I will let you go?" I frowned and remained silent for a moment. "Your majesty is the supreme ruler. Naturally, you keep your word." Sunlight shone on the green glazed tiles. The wind softly lifted the willow leaves, casting shadows on the palace walls. The usually proud and reserved emperor looked at me, suddenly filled with regret. A promise from the Son of Heaven is unbreakable.
But why? He's no saint.
Why can't he occasionally follow his heart and leave himself room to regret? These days, I have received rewards, and my hands have become a little more well off. The provisions sent from the imperial kitchen were much better than before. But on this day, when Yunwoo went to the kitchen to pick up the meals, she ran into the senior palace maid serving Su Jiu. Su Jiu had only recently gained favor and was in a high-spirited mood. Naturally, those under her command began to bully others, insisting that Yunwoo had taken things from their palace. Who doesn't know your mistress is about to be sent out of the palace? She has no family background. How could she deserve these things? Yunwoo, furious, argued back. When Su Jiu found out, she personally came to Luoxia Pavilion with her entourage. She first surveyed the courtyard, then arrogantly looked at me. After a while, she suddenly smiled. When all the palace ladies first entered the palace, your beauty was the most outstanding. Yet, I never expected to see you again in such a state. Your palace maid offended me. Hand her over. I will teach her a lesson. Over the years, incidents like this were not rare. But this was the first time she had come herself. Perhaps she feared that once I left, she would never again have the chance to flaunt her power before me. Saying so, she ordered the eunuchs behind her to seize Yunwoo. I stepped forward to block them and asked, "Your Highness, are you going to abuse your power?" She replied coldly, "I am Jiu. You are of no rank or status. Even if it's just your palace maid, if I strike you today, no one will dare say a word against me." Then she barked sharply, "Hurry and take her away." In the scuffle, I was pushed to the ground. Yunwoo, tears in her eyes, said, "It's all my fault for losing my temper." Su Jiu sneered, "Your fault? I think it's your mistress's fault. If she hadn't provoked the noble consort, Luoxia Pavilion wouldn't have fallen to such a state that anyone could bully it in these 3 years." Before her words had even finished, a voice outside the courtyard rang out angrily. "Anyone can bully you? What if her rank is higher than yours? Would you still dare to act like this?" Su Jiu trembled, staring at the newcomer in disbelief, whispering, "Your Majesty." The emperor's gaze lingered on me for a moment, then turned to Su Jiu. "So fond of bullying others?" Su Jiu, tears in her eyes, tried to approach the emperor, but he pushed her away.
Leave.
"You are forbidden from disturbing Shenyang from now on." Upon hearing this, Su Jiu dared not stay any longer and left with her entourage, tail between her legs. The emperor walked over, but didn't look at me. Instead, he looked down at Yunwoo with authority. "For the past 3 years, tell me all the injustices and grievances your mistress has suffered." I hurriedly said, "Your Majesty, what is this?" He reached out and gently held my palm. "You stay inside. You are not allowed to leave until she has finished speaking."
I do not know how much time passed.
As the sun set in the west and a cool breeze rose, someone finally lifted the curtain outside the room. Not long ago, on a rainy night, he had come here too, standing quietly by the door, unwilling to step inside. This time, however, he took steady steps across the place he once looked down upon and came before me, rubbing his brow, seemingly troubled. "Sorry." I showed a slight look of fear and looked at him. "Why would your Majesty say such things? He is the master of this palace city. What fault could he have? Compared to his empire and his 3,000 beauties, I am truly insignificant. His words decide the futures and fates of countless people. I am merely lucky to have his pity." The chamber was dim. The emperor lowered his eyes and frowned slightly. "What I just said in the courtyard was serious. As long as you wish and dare, today I will grant you." I interrupted him. "Your Majesty, the day to leave the palace is near. I do not wish to cause any more trouble." His expression suddenly softened, a twitch at the corner of his lips, and he finally came to his senses, voice somewhat unstable. "Yes, I almost forgot. I promised the noble consort first and approved the marriage grant to phone you later. You are to leave the palace." After that day, I stayed behind closed doors, focusing on embroidering peace talismans. Yunwoo told me that after the emperor returned, he was furious and punished many people. Su Jiyu was demoted 3 ranks to a mere maid. Even the noble consort was neglected. For a whole month, the emperor did not set foot in the harem. In no time, the day of the ancestral rites arrived. Once again, I saw Fengyu. He wore his official robe, his features tall and clear, the crimson hem of his garment flowing like clouds, giving him a distant coldness. When his eyes met mine, he smiled faintly, like spring flowers, like the bright moon. It was easy to imagine how many girls liked him. The emperor stood at the front. After offering incense, he suddenly turned to glance. I'm not sure if it was my illusion, but beneath the pearl tassels of his crown, his gaze lingered on Fengyu for a moment before shifting to the other palace consorts. After quite a while, he turned away. I watched his back. He ascended the throne early, now only 22, tall and dignified. He was a ruler admired and loved by the palace consorts, a decisive and commanding emperor in the eyes of the world. But I suddenly remembered, 5 or 6 years ago on that spring night at the dock, he was still a gentle gentleman leaning on a fan by the tilted bridge, helping me with a smile through his sleeve, saying, "Miss, are you here to see the lanterns too? It's crowded tonight, be careful." I bow respectfully to heaven and earth, sun, moon, and stars. Peace and tranquility. I worship the spirit of the earth beneath. That night, I delivered the embroidered peace talismans to the various palaces. The sacrifice ceremony had just ended, and the imperial consorts were all very exhausted, naturally having no interest in seeing me. So I simply handed the items through the palace gate and left. But when I reached the emperor's palace gate, Lu Gonggong seemed to have already been informed that I was coming. He was waiting there stiffly and even handed me a cloak, saying, "His Majesty is inside waiting for you." Waiting for me? My heart tightened. I fastened the cloak around myself and entered. The emperor sat at his desk, reading memorials. Hearing the noise, he looked up and smiled lightly at me. "This cloak suits you well. My taste hasn't been wrong." I bowed to thank him. He came over, handing me a memorial. "Take a look." I quickly took a step back, my expression fearful. He grasped my hand and sighed. "This is the marriage proposal memorial submitted by Fengyu today. His words are sincere, and his feelings deep. The end of the month is near, and I have no reason to refuse him. Shenyang, tell me, what should I do?" Then he stepped closer, gripping my shoulder with interest. "How about you beg me?" "Beg how?" He curled his lips. "Like the other women in the harem, flattering me, pleasing me." "Shenyang, how soft my heart is depends entirely on your ability." Then he suddenly reached out and unfastened the cloak from my shoulders. The cloak dropped to the floor. He reached toward the frog buttons on my palace dress. I stepped back and said, "Your Majesty, you said you would never favor me in this lifetime." His face darkened. His cold voice trembled slightly with reluctance and regret. "I regret it now. Is that not allowed?" Seeing you smile at him today, I regretted it so much my guts turned green. Sitting here just now, I suddenly thought, you will marry him, share his bed, bear his children, and it pains me terribly. 3 years ago, you should have been mine. I looked at him expressionlessly, but said something irrelevant. When I delivered the peace talismans to the noble consort just now, I heard she plans to bring Your Majesty her homemade stew later. Your Majesty won't let her good intentions go unrewarded, right? Just like 3 years ago. The emperor clenched his fists at his side. After a long silence, he finally spoke with great anger.
"Fine.
You're doing very well." The next day, the emperor's edict granting my marriage was spread throughout the palace and beyond. He especially granted me the grace to remain in the palace to wait for marriage. He even gave me the title of county lady. This made my residence in the palace over the years legitimate. It seemed everyone forgot that I had once been an imperial consort. Fengyu held military power, and many sought to curry favor with him. So overnight, my residence, Luoxia Pavilion, was filled with gifts. Feng Yu's betrothal gifts also arrived. Yunwu was extremely happy. She counted the items over and over, as if confirming something. Finally, with reddened eyes, she asked me, "It's so good, my lady, that in this life I still get to see you wear a wedding dress." It was truly bittersweet, but I understood. This was the best ending I could hope for. 3 years of cold treatment were enough to make me see clearly that I never really wanted to be any woman in the harem. The noble consort had grown up with him in love, but even now, it had all been exhausted. He wiped her tears, cherished her handkerchief, but in his heart, perhaps he only wondered when the noble consort's maternal family would fall. He was tired of the act. Ningpin was carrying the imperial heir, but he was not particularly happy about the child's arrival. As for other consorts, Ro Fei, Wang Guoren, Su Jiu, they each had their own fate and were no longer my concern. Because I understood that if I loved him and obeyed him like the others, he would never have such interest in me as he does now. On my wedding day, the emperor came to send me off. The wedding dress was like fire. He saw it, and his brows twitched slightly, saying, "Go. Stay far from him. Never come back." I bowed to him. He helped me up, his hand gripping my arm tightly, with great strength, but eventually he slowly released me. As he turned, I overheard his conversation with Eunuch Sun. "His Majesty has good taste. This wedding dress is truly beautiful." The emperor seemed to smile lightly and said leisurely, "Beautiful? Someone else's." Suddenly, I remembered the last words the emperor said to me before the noble consort arrived. If I could go back to 3 years ago, I wouldn't have made that promise. In the second year after I married Feng Yu, he took me to the south for a trip. On the way back, I discovered I was pregnant. At the same time, news came from the palace. The emperor's third child was born. Ningpin gave birth to a prince last winter, but never fully recovered. The emperor didn't visit her, and even the eldest prince was no longer favored. The most favored was the newly born third princess. She was said to be delicate and beautiful, resembling her mother. I never met the third princess's mother. It was said she was a commoner who entered the palace and was exclusively favored, stealing the limelight. Long after, I finally met this unprecedentedly favored consort. There was something familiar about her brows and eyes. Who she resembled, I couldn't say. When I was 5 months pregnant, the noble consort's maternal family fell from power. She was implicated and gradually distanced from the emperor, eventually requesting to enter the cold palace. Because of this, the emperor, overwhelmed with sorrow, rejected the minister's proposal to hold another selection of palace ladies. No one cared whether his sorrow was genuine. The ministers only lamented that they could no longer use their daughters or sisters to curry favor with the emperor, at least for now. For many years after, no new women entered the harem. After all, a lonely sovereign rules a cold court. The end.